money to states and local communities for preventative health care programs. And now to live coverage of the U.S. House here on C-SPAN. U.S. House here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by the guest chaplain, Reverend Dr. Jack Graham, Prestonwood Baptist Church, Plano, Texas.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we are blessed by your presence, amazed by your grace, and dependent upon your strength for every day. We praise you for your abundant provision, and we are forever grateful for your strengthening, sustaining love. We do not take these blessings for granted. We make it our holy ambition to glorify you as we offer our lives in devoted service to your kingdom first, to our beloved country. We pray for one another with the confidence that you hear repentant hearts and respond to those who humbly seek to obey you and live by your wisdom. We pray for personal renewal, for robust faith, and a vibrant vision for the future. Remembering that righteousness exalts a nation, we turn to you and trust you to not only make us great, but to make us good. We pray in the name of God, who is able to raise his dear Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, to life and give us eternal hope in him. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House her approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal now stands approved.
Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1, Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The journal stands approved.
Madam Speaker.
For what purpose the gentleman from Texas?
Madam Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make a point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without objection, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Johnson, is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is with great privilege that I welcome my dear friend Dr. Jack Graham, pastor of Prestonwood Baptist Church in Plano, one of the nation's largest, most dynamic congregations, as our guest chaplain for today's opening prayer. The mission at Prestonwood Baptist is to glorify God by introducing Jesus Christ as Lord to as many people as possible and to develop them in Christian living using the most effective means to impact the world, making a positive difference in this generation. Pastor Graham is an anointed and amazing speaker, accomplished author, community service, and bold leader who truly walks by faith. It is an honor to have him here in the People's House, blessing our nation's business and government leaders in Jesus' precious name. Thank you, Pastor Graham, for all you do as a true servant of the Lord. God bless you, and I salute you.
The chair will entertain up to 15 further requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. What purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, Arizona border ranchers tell me that when illegals enter Arizona with their maps, their lists of churches that give sanctuary, they also know about U.S. courts. When some illegals are actually captured, they oftentimes ask the Border Patrol if their case will be in the 9th Court or the 10th Court. Illegals want their cases in the 9th Circuit Court because they believe, based on history, the 9th Court is liberal, tolerant, and more lenient regarding illegal immigration and border security than the nearby 10th Court. The 9th Court proved the illegals correct when the liberal court wrongly threw out the Arizona law allowing state law enforcement officers to enforce laws against illegal entry. Arizona had to enact this law because the federal government doesn't adequately secure the border. And how can a court possibly say it's unconstitutional for a state to protect its citizens? But there is hope. The 9th Court has been reversed more than any other court by the Supreme Court, and hopefully the Supreme Court will rule that Arizona and the federal government have constitutional authority to protect the border from illegal entry. And that's just the way it is.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise? Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The realities of the Republican budget are starting to come into focus, especially health care. Vouchers to insurance companies will cost seniors and society more. Today, members of Congress are being inundated by visits from hospitals and health care providers who are in a panic about Medicaid block grant that will allow the federal government to shift its burden for the poor and the disabled to states who often cannot or will not make up the difference in the fund loss. Most disappointing, Republicans have abandoned the work on Medicare reform. The reform provisions in the Affordable Care Act used to be bipartisan. Instead of increasing the total cost of health care and shifting the burdens to elderly, poor, and disabled, we should be taking our medical spending, already the highest in the world, and show how we can get more out of it.
What purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise? Without objection.
Madam Speaker, this week the House and Senate will consider a bill to fund the government for the rest of the fiscal year that reduces spending by $38.5 billion. Considering the position of Harry Reid at the beginning of the year was that we shouldn't cut a single dime, we have moved the conversation in the right direction. Senator Schumer called Republican cuts extreme, but even the full $61 billion that the House pushed for would have only made a small dent in our huge deficit. The real extreme position is to do nothing. If we do nothing, interest payments and entitlement spending will consume the entire budget. If we do nothing, we will lose the capability to defend our nation. If we do nothing, our roads and rails will crumble. This week, Republicans will present an alternative to the do-nothing strategy. For that, we will certainly be labeled extreme. We have a great nation, but as long as we're beholden to our creditors, foreign and domestic, we risk losing prosperity and freedom. We shouldn't wait any longer to get our budget in order. We can begin this week, but we shouldn't stop until we pass long-term solutions. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentlewoman from Maine rise? Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, later today we are taking up a bill to repeal funding for prevention and public health. Members will have a simple choice. The choice is to pay now or pay later. Staying healthy and treating disease will always have a price. In my state of Maine, treating preventable chronic diseases held a price tag of $1.4 billion last year alone. But there is a better way. We can invest in preventing these life-threatening, expensive illnesses. We can invest in slowing the spread of HIV/AIDS, and we can promote better nutrition to reduce obesity. That is exactly what the Prevention and Public Health Fund does in my state and throughout the country. It invests in prevention and good health, and it reduces chronic disease. Spending just $10 per person in preventative programs will save this country $16 billion a year in health care costs. Madam Speaker, our choice is not just pay now or pay later. It's pay less now or pay a lot more later. And that's a choice we can't afford to make. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On this day in 1743, our founding father Thomas Jefferson was born. But I rise today to talk about the National Auctioneers Association celebrating National Auction Week. I'm proud as an auctioneer for over 16 years to serve with fellow auctioneer in our auction caucus here in Congress, Representative Billy Long from Missouri. Auction and auctioneers help families, businesses all over this great land sell trillions of dollars worth of assets every year. And so I'll leave you with this thought. Hey, now what do I get for it? 7 minutes, 25, now 35? Sold. And then we sell it every day. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
What purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island rise? Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize and honor the Disabled American Veterans, an organization representing our nation's wartime disabled vets. Disabled American Veterans works to ensure our government fulfills its promise to those who so bravely served our nation, and I am pleased to honor that service at their 67th annual convention this week in Rhode Island. The greatest tribute that we can pay to our disabled veterans is providing them access to quality health care and education and mental health services, housing, and employment assistance. For their courage and commitment and for the burdens borne by their families, our disabled veterans and their loved ones must receive the support and services they rightly deserve. These men and women of valor have made tremendous sacrifices in the name of freedom and in advancement of our nation's security. We live in a free society today because of the service these men and women and their families have given our nation. I applaud the work of the Disabled American Veterans for their dedicated service to our nation's heroes and their families. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Delaware rise?
Madam Speaker, rise to seek permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to recognize the many volunteer fire companies that play such an important role in protecting public safety in my home state of Delaware. Like many Delawareans who have seen or been helped directly by one of our volunteer firefighters, I continue to be amazed and humbled by their professionalism and willingness to sacrifice to put the safety of others ahead of their own. Today, I'd like to recognize the Holloway Terrace Fire Company, which is celebrating 90 years of service to our community. For generations, members of the Holloway Terrace Fire Company have given their all to protect those who live and work in Newcastle, Delaware. In that time, no one has given more to the fire company than Mr. William Bill Maxwell, Sr. This year, Bill is celebrating 50 years of service in the Holloway Terrace Fire Company. He joined as a junior member and has risen through the ranks to become Deputy Chief, Fire Chief, and now a member of the Board of Directors. I'd like to thank every volunteer firefighter who works to protect Delaware communities and encourage them to continue their service for many years to come. Thank you. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise? Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I ask this Congress to address a grave public health crisis facing not only my district but my country. Too many of our young people are dying. Many high school students in Metro Detroit, the area that I represent, many of whom are African American, are being hit by an epidemic of HIV/AIDS. I urge this Congress to support a piece of legislation sponsored by the National Black Clergy for the elimination of HIV/AIDS to address this issue, save the lives of our young people, and provide them with hope for a promising future. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I rise to honor a giant of Kentucky's legendary bourbon industry, Bill Samuels, Jr., president of Maker's Mark Distillery, on the occasion of his retirement. His father's recipe first got bourbon invited to the top shelf. His mother had the radical idea of dipping bottles in red wax. His godfather was Jim Beam. Bill's career path seemed obvious, but obvious was never Bill's path. Everyone agrees distilling bourbon isn't rocket science, but only Bill can make that claim with authority. He's excelled at both. He designed fuel injectors for Polaris missiles and graduated from Vanderbilt Law School. Finally, 4 decades ago, he decided to give the family business 1 year, but he never left. When his time came, he didn't merely take over. He took Maker's Mark to unimaginable heights. Then a little-known brand, Maker's is now among the world's most sought-after icons. It's red wax, a renowned icon. And every barrel maintains the same recipe and craftsmanship as Bill Sr.'s first batch in 1954. As co-chair of the Congressional Bourbon Caucus, I urge my colleagues to join me in toasting Bill as he passes the wax-tipped baton into the capable hands of his son, Rob. Bill's service to Maker's Mark and Kentucky, like his bourbon, continues a family tradition, makes our Commonwealth proud, and is simply the stuff of legend. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
For permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This week, the Republicans are rolling out their budget. And some people say it's a new, bold budget. I'd say to my friends on the Republican side of the aisle, it's the same old budget. Misplaced priorities. Focus on making sure we continue to have the Bush tax cuts for the wealthiest people in America, tax cuts for oil and gas companies when we're at $110 a barrel, and not focus the cuts on NPR or Planned Parenthood or energy efficiency. Those aren't what created the debt that this country faces. We obviously have a problem, but those things came from big tax cuts, prosecuting 2 wars, and not policing Wall Street. That's where this budget should be focused. Let's get to the real issues that this country faces. So I would say to my friends on the Republican side of the aisle, go back, start over with your budget, and let's really hit the things that are important. We need to be making things in America, not giving tax breaks to send things offshore. So let's focus our real efforts, come together as a country, and deal with this budget. And with that, I'd yield back to the Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Connecticut rise? Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize the mentors and high school students participating in the ACE Mentor Program headquartered in Stamford, Connecticut. ACE brings together nearly 6,000 volunteers in the integrated construction industry to mentor more than 10,000 students in 32 states each year. Most of the high school students in this program come from disadvantaged backgrounds. ACE matches teams of these young men and women with volunteers in the construction industry, creating career and education pathways for disadvantaged youth. Each year, leading companies in the construction industry contribute an estimated $22 million in volunteer time to this program. Connecticut-based companies providing volunteers to ACE include the EMCOR Group, United Technologies, and Lane Construction. I applaud the volunteers, students, and companies involved in the ACE Mentor Program, and I'm encouraged by their commitment to create jobs and improve young lives. And with that, I yield back, Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise? Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Tomorrow marks the 100-day celebration for congressional Republicans taking control of the House. How will we celebrate? Well, not by focusing on jobs or the economy or growing the middle class, but rather with a Road to Ruin budget that will end Medicare while extending tax breaks for big oil. The Road to Ruin Republican budget proposal will end Medicare. It will end a program that 46 million seniors and disabled individuals depend on for their health care. Rather than the path to prosperity as it's been designated, this budget is more like the road to riches, a road paved in gold with lavish handouts for special interests, paid for and built with dollars from senior citizens who will see their hard-earned benefits rationed. We must stop this Road to Ruin budget, lest it lead to a cliff of catastrophe for our nation's seniors. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I was very saddened this morning to hear the news of the passing of the husband of our former colleague, Jane Harman. Sidney Harman lived to, as the report came out, to the ripe young age of almost 93. He was an amazing individual. I knew of him because of his great work in an organization called BENS, Business Executives for National Security. He also very famously took on the responsibility of what he described as an American icon, Newsweek magazine, when he made the decision to ensure that it would continue to to thrive. And he has done a phenomenal job. And I'd like to say that our thoughts and prayers are with our former colleague Jane and the entire Harmon family. The world is a greater place for Sidney Harmon having lived and a lesser place for his passing.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise?
1 minute.
Without objection.
Before Medicare, 25% of the seniors in America lived in poverty, many driven there by the lack of affordable, decent health insurance. Medicare passed with virtually no Republican support. It solved that problem. Seniors today are guaranteed quality, affordable health care. They pay about 27% of the cost. Well, under the guise of fiscal responsibility, the Republican budget wants to turn back the clock to the good old days, throw the seniors into the private health care market again. And the estimates are seniors would have to pay 68% of their health care costs under the Republican plan. That would drive many into poverty. It's opening day of the 2012 fiscal budget year, and President Obama has a chance to hit the first pitch out of the park by declaring Medicare will not end during his presidency, on his watch. He won't stick it to seniors. He's going to stand up for seniors.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois rise? Without objection.
Aren't just about a series of numbers. Budgets fundamentally are moral documents. And I fear that Republicans have made clear that their moral compass puts the wealthy and big business ahead of the American middle class, our seniors, disabled, and poor. In order to pay for enormous tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires, they're ready to abolish the guarantee of Medicare. In order to protect tax cuts for the oil industry, they would cut Medicaid, resulting in seniors and disabled being forced out of nursing homes and causing poor children to lose health care coverage to pay more. In order to pay for tax cuts for businesses that ship American jobs overseas, they would cut investments in education and job training programs. The Republican budget does not represent Americans' core values and should be rejected. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise? Without objection.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise today to honor and pay tribute to two heroic officers from the Naval Air Station in Lemoore, California, that I represent, who tragically lost their lives on April 6, 2011. Lieutenant Matthew Ira Lowell and Lieutenant Nathan Hollingsworth Williams. These pilots were among our best, doing extraordinary things. Lieutenant Lowell of Plantation, Florida, received his commission in 2002 and later was assigned to the Strike Fighter Squadron 94 based at Lemoore Naval Air Station. Throughout his service, Lieutenant Lowell earned the Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, and was training to become a pilot for the Blue Angels exhibit team. Lieutenant Williams of Oswego, New York, received his commission in 2004, and following his training served in Afghanistan aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Returning home, Lieutenant Williams became a flight instructor at Lemoore Naval Air Station, training other flight officers on this aircraft, the Super Hornet. Madam Speaker, the deaths of these two individuals, Lieutenant Williams and Lieutenant Lowell, are a tragic reminder that the men and women who serve our nation every day in harm's way throughout the world put their lives at risk. Please join me for a moment of silence as we honor the service of these two individuals for our country.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise? Without objection.
Madam Speaker, Medicare is a guarantee that senior citizens, regardless of their economic circumstances, will have the medical care that they need in their twilight years. Medicare plays a critical role in removing doubt from people's minds that if they have an ailment and are otherwise uninsurable in the marketplace, as many are, that their needs will be met. Not to say that the program doesn't have its problems. We periodically need to do a quote-unquote doc fix, and we have to find a way to pay that in the long term. There's real issues with regards to the reimbursement rates and making sure that they're adequate so seniors can get their care. But the answer, Madam Speaker, is not phasing out Medicare. there's a need to mend it, not end it. I think by improving the quality of care for seniors, ensuring that seniors have access to preventative care, we can help decrease overall health care costs without abolishing and phasing out Medicare, as is contained in the Republican budget proposal. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise?
Ask a privileged report from the Committee on Rules for filing under the rule.
Clerk will report the title.
Report to accompany House Resolution 218, resolution providing for consideration of the bill H.R. 1473, making appropriations for the Department of Defense and other departments and agencies of the government for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2011, and for other purposes, providing for consideration of the concurrent resolution, House Concurrent Resolution 35, directing the Clerk of the House of Representatives to make a correction in the enrollment of H.R. 1473, and providing for consideration of the concurrent resolution, House Concurrent Resolution 36, directing the Clerk of the House of Representatives to make a correction in the enrollment of H.R. 1473.
Referred to the House calendar and ordered printed. Does the gentleman from California rise?
From the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 218 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 29, House Resolution 218. Resolved, that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill H.R. 1473, making appropriations for the Department of Defense and other departments and agencies of the government for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2011, and for other purposes. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill to final passage without intervening motion except 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Appropriations, and 2, 1 motion to recommit. Section 2, A. If H.R. 1473 is passed by the House, it shall be in order to consider separately in the House the concurrent resolutions specified in subsection B. All points of order against consideration of each concurrent resolution are waived. Each concurrent resolution shall be considered as read. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on each concurrent resolution to final adoption without intervening motion, except 20 minutes of debate equally divided and controlled by the Chair and Ranking Minority Member of the Committee on Appropriations. B. The concurrent resolutions specified in subsection A are as follows. 1. The concurrent resolution, House Concurrent Resolution 35, directing the Clerk of the House of Representatives to make a correction in the enrollment of H.R. 1473, and 2, the concurrent resolution, House Concurrent Resolution 36, directing the Clerk of the House of Representatives to make a correction in the enrollment of H.R. 1473. Section 3. If the House receives a message from the Senate transmitting its passage of H.R. 1473 without amendment, then the clerk shall not certify an enrollment of the bill until notified by the Speaker or by message from the Senate that the Senate has taken the question on adoption of each concurrent resolution specified in Section 2 that it was adopted by the House.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
I rise to a point of order against consideration of H.Res. 218.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
Madam Speaker, I rise to objection considering this rule because the rule in its final language that says that the clerk shall hold the enrollment of this bill until the Senate considers bills to defund health care reform and considers a bill to defund Planned Parenthood. As such, it violates the rules of the House, which require that anything passed by this House be filed forthwith. And with your permission, I'll read that section. The clerk shall examine all bills, amendments, and joint resolutions after passage by the House, and in cooperation with the Senate, examine all bills and joint resolutions that have passed both the House to see that they are correctly enrolled, and forthwith present those bills and joint resolutions that originate in the House to the President in person for their signature by the Speaker and President of the Senate, and report to the House the fact and date of their presentment. In fact, what this rule does, it says that after this is passed, it shall not be sent to the Senate, shall not be sent to the President until the other body, the Senate, takes an action. considers these two things which already have been considered here. This is clearly a violation of the rules and a very dangerous violation of the Constitution as well, because we believe in this House that our actions once taken trigger an action in the other body or by the President. If we are to say that bills, when passed by this body, are held in stasis at the desk by an officer of this institution, a non-elected officer of this institution, we are in fact violating this rule. It is very important, Madam Speaker, that you rule that this rule needs to be sent back and be cleansed of that language, or else we are in effect saying the passage of an act here shall be contingent upon the consideration of something in the Senate, and that is a dangerous precedent, violates the laws, and violates the Constitution of the United States, and I ask for your ruling.
Does any other member wish to address this issue? The point of order. Chair is prepared to rule.
Can I make one?
Enrollment is the process by which a proposed act of Congress is printed on parchment for presentation to the President. A House-originated measure is enrolled by the Clerk of the House. A Senate-originated measure is enrolled by the Secretary of the Senate. After the two Houses have agreed to a unitary text for a measure, they still may agree to alter that text before presentment. The usual vehicle for this is a concurrent resolution. Such a concurrent resolution typically directs the Clerk of the House or the Secretary of the Senate to make specified changes to text previously cleared for enrollment. Such a concurrent resolution might even be proposed in anticipation of the actions of the two Houses to clear the presumptive text for enrollment. It is not unusual for the clerk to take notice of the pendency of such a concurrent resolution and to seek guidance from the Speaker on the prospect that the concurrent resolution might be adopted by the two Houses. The Speaker likewise must assess the likelihood of adoption of such a concurrent resolution before seeing that the enrollment is signed by the presiding officers of each House or presented to the President. The two Houses could even adopt a concurrent resolution asking the President to return an enrollment so that they might change it. Just as Section 301 of the Congressional Budget Act as a matter of rulemaking contemplates the possibility of holding an enrollment for a time, so also might a proposed special order of business enable such an interim hold of an enrollment.
Point of parliamentary inquiry, Madam Speaker.
The point of order is overruled. The gentleman is recognized.
Point of parliamentary inquiry, Madam Speaker.
Would the gentleman's status is
Am I
concerned?
to understand this rule correctly, that under the rule we are about to consider, if the House of Representatives approves the continuing resolution, that bill, despite the fact that the government is going to cease operating unless it passes, could theoretically sit at the desk, never to be sent to the President, never to be sent to the Senate ad infinitum if the Senate fails to take a specific action?
Has stated a matter which is about to be debated in the debate of the rule that is pending.
Speaker.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker,
gentleman from California,
debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to my very good friend from Boulder, Mr. Polis, pending which I yield myself such time as I might consume. During consideration of this measure, all time yielded will be for debate purposes only, and I ask that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on the matter before us.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 hour.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This rule provides for consideration of 3 measures, H.R. 1473, H. Con. Res. 35, and H. Con. Res. 36. H.R. 1473 funds the government for the remainder of the fiscal year 2011. H. Con. Res. 35 and 36 are enrollment correction measures that end federal funding for the President's health care plan and Planned Parenthood. As these measures represent a final agreement on this fiscal year's funding on par with a conference report, this rule provides simple up or down votes on all 3 of these items. Furthermore, This rule directs the clerk of the House to refrain from finalizing the enrollment of H.R. 1473 until the Senate has acted on all three measures to ensure that the enrollment corrections resolutions get full consideration. H.R. 1473 will be debatable for 1 hour. H-Conres 35 and 36 will be debatable for 20 minutes each. Now, Madam Speaker, it has been a long, difficult, ugly, messy process, but we have finally achieved an important victory for the American people. Today's underlying continuing resolution is a step toward the fulfillment of a fundamental promise that was made to the taxpayers. We will halt the practice of reckless and unchecked growth in federal spending and, critically important, Madam Speaker, we will reverse the course that we have been on. This final continuing resolution for fiscal year 2011 imposes the single largest cut in non-defense spending in our nation's history. It also implements a number of reforms that will ensure greater accountability in how tax dollars are spent. Madam Speaker, this is not the end of our work to restore discipline and accountability to the federal budget. Far from it. After fighting so hard to get to this point, it's important to point out that the truly difficult work still lies ahead for us. This resolution is also not the perfect measure we were all working for. Many of us fought hard to have even greater cuts and more significant reforms. But today's action is so critical because it is the turning point. It is the turning point, Madam Speaker. It's that profoundly important first step. The American people have said enough is enough, and this Congress is finally responding. We're ending an era that has seen growth in non-defense discretionary spending over the past few years of 82%. Under Speaker Pelosi, Madam Speaker, we have had an increase in non-defense discretionary spending of 82%. We are making serious, meaningful cuts in the size and the scope of government. But as I said, these are only just the beginning. When we conclude this debate, we will turn directly to the fiscal 2012 budget. Our very thoughtful Budget Committee Chairman, Mr. Ryan, has put forth a bold budget plan that seeks to tackle the fundamental reforms that are absolutely essential to the future viability of our economy. If the process we have just come through has been difficult, the task that lies ahead is Herculean. A $1.6 trillion deficit poses an almost unfathomable challenge. It demands a tremendous level of seriousness and resolve that each and every one of us must rise to. The consequences of failing to do so would be both disastrous and predictable. We've already gotten a strong dose of the economic challenges that would ensue. For months and months on end, we have dealt with a moribund economy and a very painful lack of job opportunities. The stifling nature of the national debt, the tax and regulatory uncertainty, the policies that favor government intervention over entrepreneurial empowerment, all of these have contributed to our economic challenges. It is increasingly apparent that the recent positive movement on job creation has been fueled by our effort to rein in wasteful government spending and restore the certainty that businesses need to make new investment. As we continue our efforts to impose fiscal discipline, I hope and believe we will continue to see positive news on the jobs front. But these economic challenges are far from over for most hardworking Americans. We know what difficult times we and the American people are facing. We know very well how painful these challenges have been, but they pale in comparison to the crisis that will come if we do not have the courage to fundamentally transform the way this government spends money. We need look no further than the Eurozone to see what's in store without a dramatic change in course. We've seen Western European economies come to the brink of collapse, crippled under the weight of their sovereign debt, and nearly drag some of the world's largest, most stable economies along with them. The coming budget debate will be a seminal moment in which we must reject this failed economic model. Today, with this historic spending cut, we are paving the way to do just that. Now, Madam Speaker, this is not the end of our work, but it is, as I said, just the beginning. I urge my colleagues to support this rule and the underlying resolutions, and with that I reserve the balance of my time.
What purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I thank the gentleman from California for yielding me the customary 30 minutes. For all the talk of Republicans' commitment to cutting spending, there are several odd things about this bill before us that would lead one to believe that it's more of a partisan political exercise than a serious attempt to get the nation's fiscal house in order, which we need and deserve as Americans. Under this bill, critical services that many Americans rely on to educate our children, keep our streets safe, improve public health, keep our water and air clean, would face tens of billions of dollars worth of real and difficult cuts. Times are tough. We know we have to cut spending. Okay, so why does this bill then provide the Pentagon with an additional $5 billion above the previous request at a time when the civilian and uniformed military, including thoughtful policymakers from both parties, believe that we need to reduce spending across the board? Joint Chief of Staff Admiral Mullen stated that our national debt is our biggest national security threat. He also noted that the past decade's doubling of the Department of Defense budget has led to undisciplined spending and waste within the department. Secretary Gates concurs, stating that we can't hold ourselves exempt from the belt-tightening. And yet, despite members of the military and civilians involved with defense saying that they, too, can't be spared, not only have they been spared by the Republican majority, but increased by $5 billion. The recent bipartisan Commission on Fiscal Responsibility, often called the Simpson-Bowles Commission, called for substantial defense reductions over the next 10 years. They recommended cuts that would have led to $60 billion in savings in security spending in the first year and kept our nation safe. In fact, if we implemented the Commission's recommendations around security spending, we would save $100 billion in 2015 alone. But Republicans didn't go after their favorite areas of big government spending. Instead, they went after our efforts to strengthen our schools, keep our air and water clean, and keep our streets safe. And the rest of their so-called spending cuts don't seem to be spending much at all, saving much at all. In fact, yesterday we had an interesting discussion in Rules Committee about whether this bill really even saves close to the $38 billion claimed. Apparently, most of the savings are from allocations of money that wouldn't be spent anyway. An Associated Press story yesterday called this bill budget tricks, saying that 23 of the $38 billion aren't even real savings. They're counting savings from unspent census money. This is from the AP. Leftover federal construction funding. $2.5 billion from the most recent renewal of highway programs that can't even be spent because of restrictions that have already been set by other legislation. Today's Wall Street Journal calls the Republican spending bill spending cut hokum. Madam Speaker, I'd like to submit to the record today's spending cut hokum bill from the Wall Street Journal.
Without objection.
Now, the spending cut hokum bill identifies that there were $18 billion in real cuts and $20 billion in fake accounting tricks that are not real cuts. And yesterday in Rules, I actually had the opportunity to ask the chairman of the Appropriations Committee if he could explain that discrepancy between the claim cuts and the real cuts that those who have dived in have identified, and he demurred on that account. So in the end, what have the Republicans accomplished? I'd like to talk about this graphically and sort of show the American people what we're talking about. Now, these charts, I use the Wall Street Journal's figures, which credit the Republicans for more cuts in the Associated Press, but out of caution, I want to trust the Journal in this case as a well-researched source and use their figures, even though they have less than the AP. But the Wall Street Journal still says that the majority of the Republican cuts are, in fact, hokum cuts. So here's what we're talking about. Here's what we're talking about, Madam Speaker. This is the deficit. This is the deficit. Okay, this is the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, estimate of the deficit, $1.399 trillion. This is what we're talking about here. This is the continuing resolution savings. That's it. Not one penny more. Let me sort of take an example of an American family to kind of, we have to take a few zeros off of this for most Americans to even understand these figures. So let's say the deficit is $139,000, not $1.39 trillion. So $139,000. My business, let's say, I was a small businessman before I came to Congress. I understand how to balance a budget. I know most American families are trying to balance their family paycheck, stay in their home, make their mortgage payment. $139,000 you lose in a year, okay? That's tough. You have to take out a second mortgage, max out your credit cards. You try to cover that $139,000, okay? Then you know you got to make some serious changes. What are you going to do? You hem and you haw for a couple months. You argue with your creditors. You threaten to shut down your business on the eve of shutting down your business because you can't afford another loss of $139,000. What do? You figure out how to lose $137,000 the next year. You know what? That $137,000 is going to put that American family out of business just as surely as that $139,000, but that is the Republican approach to this bill. Now let me talk about some of the alternatives we have before us. Whoops.
Will the gentleman yield?
I'll be happy to discuss this on your own time. I want to go through this excellent chart. If the gentleman wants to come over, he can look at what we have here and what the Democrats have presented. If we were serious about deficit reduction, Republicans could have supported several amendments offered by Democrats and voted on in the House when we debated H.R. 1. The Democratic amendments alone would have cut spending by nearly $129 billion, more than 3 times the amount that's even claimed in this bill. Here's some examples. Congressman Stark and Congresswoman Lee offered one amendment that would have reduced defense spending to its level 3 years ago. We were already in 2 wars at that time as well, saving $36 billion in the first year alone, and that would have left intact a defense budget of $688 billion, more than enough to meet the security needs of our nation. Congressman Nadler offered an amendment that would have finally ended our support for the war in Afghanistan, saving $90 billion. Congressman Woolsey offered an amendment that would have saved $415 million by ending the V-22 Osprey program. In fact, just yesterday in Rules, I also proposed an amendment that would have reduced our troop presence in Europe, which would have saved $415 million. Our European allies, Madam Speaker, are some of the richest countries in the world. It's time they paid their fair way. What is the strategic rationale for an ongoing presence in Germany? The Nazis are gone. The Soviets are gone. Even former Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld has questioned the ongoing presence of our troops in Europe. I also proposed an amendment eliminating the drug czar. The drug czar's office spends $21 million a year, and yet drug use has gone up since its inception. Madam Speaker, we're never going to balance the entire budget just by reducing the funds Congress spends each year as part of the appropriations process. Clearly, we all can agree we need to look at revenues and entitlements, but you're not going to make even the slightest dent in the deficit if you exempt defense spending from any cuts. In this continuing resolution before us, Republicans have exempted more than half of the domestic discretionary spending from any cuts, and it becomes very clear that the Republican plan isn't so much about serious deficit reduction, and it is about protecting their favorite government, big spending, while simultaneously slashing away at their favorite targets like education, the environment, and the safety net. Here's what we could potentially accomplish if we work together. This shows the Republican cuts in this CR. We even add in, for the sake of argument, the hokum cuts. We put them in here too. Wall Street Journal's terms, not mine. And we include the proposed Democratic amendments. I think this is something that we could be proud of. And you know what, Madam Speaker? I think more Democrats would support a program that didn't only cut the programs that many on my side of the aisle feel strongly about, but also made some of the difficult decisions with where the real money is with regard to defense and security spending. Yes, Madam Speaker, just like that American family that we raised digging its way out of a $127,000 a year loss, we need to make real impact on reducing the federal budget deficit. This will take actions across the aisle to make sure that we can leave our country in a better situation and help the next generation fight its way out from the burden of debt that we risk placing upon them if we continue the big spending policies of the Republican Party. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, let me begin by congratulating my friend from Boulder, my Rules Committee colleague, for his very thoughtful remarks, and I'd like to respond with a few important points. First, I was struck with the fact that he went through the litany of amendments that were debated on H.R. 1. underscoring again that we have, for the first time in decades, seen a free and flowing debate and an opportunity for votes to take place here in this institution. It hadn't happened before on a continuing resolution as we saw it in our consideration of H.R. 1. I also want to say that while my friend continued to point the finger of blame, somehow characterizing this as a Republican plan, I'd like to remind him, Madam Speaker, that this happens to be the result of a negotiation that has taken place with three Democrats, the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, the Majority Leader of the United States Senate, and one Republican, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. By a 3-to-1 margin in the negotiating process, Republicans were outnumbered. And so I think that it's a mischaracterization to describe this as somehow a Republican plan that is before us. Now, to the issue that was raised about a cut being a cut, Douglas Holtz-Eakin, the former director of the Congressional Budget Office, made it clear, and he called it that. A cut is a cut. I know this attempt is being made to somehow characterize the fact that dollars have not been spent, so that means you're not actually cutting them. Well, last night in the Rules Committee, the very distinguished ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations, my good friend Mr. Dix, pointed out something that everyone in this institution should know, and that is the process of reprogramming that takes place within government agencies. We know full well that the movement of money, since money is fungible, that takes place within these different agencies is standard operating procedure. So, Madam Speaker, to claim somehow that if dollars haven't actually been spent, that they're not being cut, is just plain wrong. Now, Madam Speaker, while I talked about the negotiating process that ended up with the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, and the Majority Leader of the United States Senate, and the Speaker of the House, leading up to that, we had our very, very diligent and hardworking new chairman of the Committee on Appropriations, my friend Mr. Rogers, who has stepped up to the plate and taken on the responsibility. In fact, some call it tongue-in-cheek, but he has been very serious about being the enforcer of ensuring that we cut spending, and he's actually renamed his Appropriations Committee the Disappropriations Committee by virtue of the fact, Madam Speaker, that recognition that if we don't get our fiscal house in order, we are going to be in deep, deep trouble. And so, Madam Speaker, I want to say that, again, he was one of the negotiators leading up to the final process here, and I'd like to yield such time as he may consume to my very good friend, the chair of the Committee on Appropriations, Mr. Rogers.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for as much time as he may consume.
I thank the distinguished chairman of the Rules Committee for the time here, and to thank him for the diligent work that he continues to do as chair of the Rules Committee, the sort of traffic cop for the bills that reach this floor. I want to expand a bit, Madam Speaker, on a point that Chairman Dreyer alluded to earlier, and that is the historic nature of the bill that we will be considering on the floor. As the chairman pointed out, under Speaker Pelosi, discretionary spending in those 2 years increased by 82%, a record. With this bill, we not only are arresting that growth, but we are receding actual discretionary spending by a record amount, nearly $40 billion in actual cuts in spending. That has not ever been accomplished by this body in its history, in the history of the country. The cuts in this bill exceed anything ever passed by the House. It's the largest cut ever, by 4 times. The largest previous cut, single cut, was in 1995, when we cut around $9 billion. With this bill, you cut almost $40 billion. Now,
I don't understand sometimes my friends on the other side of the aisle when they criticize this bill. It's being supported by your president. He says, pass the bill. It's what we agreed upon. It's being supported by Senator Reid, the leader on the Senate side. It's being supported by the Speaker of the House. And it's being supported by an overwhelming number of members on this side of the aisle, and I predict a great number of Democrats will likewise support the bill. Now, on the defense portion of this bill, let me briefly refer to it. The provisions in this bill about the defense budget is exactly like it was when all parties last December, on both sides of the aisle in this body and on both sides of the aisle in the Senate body, agreed to the expenditures for the Department of Defense. We simply lifted that agreed-upon provisions for the Defense Department and dropped them into this bill. There are two people in this body that know more about defense spending than any of the rest of us, and that's the chairman of the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee on Appropriations, Bill Young of Florida, and my good friend Norman Dix, the ranking member of that subcommittee, and the ranking member on the Full Appropriations Committee, Norm Dix. He worked long and hard with Bill Young for these provisions, and I salute him for it. It's good work. It does the right things. It cuts back on the President's request for defense by some $7 or $8 billion, below what he requested. It does increase in real dollars about $5 billion over the current spending rate. But we're in 3 wars, and there's no reason at all for us to shirk from the responsibility to provide adequate funding for our troops in combat. And that's the reason why, one of the big reasons why we support this bill, why the President supports the bill, and why Senator Reid in the Senate supports the bill. And so let's focus on actual cuts in spending. We all profess that we want to cut back on the deficit for the year and for the ensuing years. The deficit this year, $1.4 trillion in just 1 year, largest in history, adding to a debt that exceeds all of our fears of some $14.2 or $3 trillion. We all say, let's cut back on spending. Here's your chance. Here's your opportunity. If you profess to be a fiscally responsible member of this House, you have a chance, yea, an obligation, to vote for this bill and support it. It's historic. We've never been here before. We've reached a pinnacle and a great opportunity for us to show to the rest of the country that we're serious about controlling the free spending nature of this body. This is your chance. Don't miss it.
Gentleman from Colorado.
A minute to respond. The gentleman from Kentucky called this a historic bill. I think much more of this kind of history, and we risk making our country's solvency history by drowning ourselves in a burden of debt. Again, effectively, for a family business, a loss of $139,000, losing $137,000 might be nice, but it puts you out of business just the same. I continue to express our wish that we included some of the Democratic cuts in this that added up to 4 times the amount of the proposed Republican cuts in this bill. As the Bard put it, the cutting of this in this bill is a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. And with that, it is my honor to yield 3 minutes to the ranking member of the Rules Committee, the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Slaughter.
Gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. And I want to talk about a different historic perspective. This bill is different, all right, and I want to try to explain that to you. But first I want to say we weren't elected, any of us, to Congress to prove that we can barely keep the government open and alive. That was never why we were sent here. We're here to make America stronger. And looking at this bill, we are utterly failing in achieving that goal. In addition to the unnecessary and politically driven cuts in the legislation, the process that brought the bill to the floor is a mockery of regular order. Never before, again, let me say, in the history of our nation, has this rule, what we're doing here today are 3 bills under one rule. You think we're going to vote for one? That would be the budget for the remainder of the year. But there are 2 other bills here to be voted on that I think you might be surprised at. It certainly took us by surprise. One of them completely defunds Planned Parenthood, having nothing in the world to do about takes away the health care bill. A matter of that importance is added as a correction onto this bill. What they said they'd like us to do is correct legislation that has not even been passed. That takes a lot of imagination. But what is more serious, and I believe that what they've done here, have added an unprecedented provision that raises serious constitutional questions. Under this rule, now pay attention here, except I don't want children to believe it. This is not the way we do things. After the House and Senate have passed this bill, and it comes back over the House will hold it and will not send it to the President. They will hold it themselves, letting the government shut down again, until the Senate votes to defund Planned Parenthood and to kill America's health care. Now, that is very similar to what we did here a few weeks ago. It seems weeks ago. It may have been last week for all I can remember. We've been working so hard. But what we did was probably one of the silliest things done in any legislative process in the world. They really passed a bill on this floor that said, we've already passed a bill and sent it to you, Senate. The Senate took the bill up and it failed. So then the House response to that failure was, if we don't hear from you by a date certain, then we're going to just say that the House bill is the law of the land. Now, all of you who've been to school know that what we do to pass a bill is the House passes a bill, the Senate passes a bill. If necessary, a conference committee reconciles the 2 bills, makes them the same, and it requires the President of the United States' signature to make a bill. But not in this House. You can believe 10 impossible things before breakfast here easily, because we're called upon to do it every day.
Gentleman from California.
I might consume, and I'd like to engage in a discussion.